Welcome to R&R Living Life. In this episode, Rick and I backtracked to near Forsyth, where just short of Forsyth we stopped in at Charleston Dam before continuing on to Cobbold Gorge. Rick and I were looking forward to spending some time out in the country to enjoy the peace and quiet and soak up the region, though on second thoughts, being a very popular spot, it might not be all that quiet. As we were travelling in the early morning, cattle were out feeding along the green pick on the edge of the road. Thankfully, the majority were roadwise, especially when approached slowly, yet we still watched out for the individuals who wanted to try his or her luck with traffic. We had travelled this section yesterday on our trip to Forsyth and Ironsley, but were still interested in the country, as there is always something different that catches our eye, especially with cattle around. As we had time to spare this morning, we stopped in at Charleston Dam, a hidden, very large body of water that captures and stores water from the Delaney River, about 6 kilometres from Forsyth. The dam is Forsyth's primary water supply. My first sight of the dam was a wow moment. Like at Croydon, here was a large body of water set in amongst the surrounding hills. This new dam, officially opened early 2022, is a hard-filled dam embankment located on the Delaney River, ensuring a secure, high-capacity water supply for the township. This new dam replaces the previous Big Reef Dam source. The dam is home to several fish species, water lilies and other aquatic life, and is an important habitat for many local bird species. We drove down a small peninsula that extends into the dam to the parking area, where we stopped and wandered the site to admire the bird life and the dam. It was so peaceful watching the birds as they fished for their morning breakfast. On our way back to the Forsyth Georgetown road, we stopped in at the cemetery on the top of the hill overlooking the dam. What a wonderful place to be laid to rest. On the northern outskirts of Forsyth was the turn-off to Cobbold Gorge. We passed the airstrip before crossing Queenslander Creek. What a rough bridge, full of corrugations and holes. I suppose we thought it would be cement, but we were proved wrong. It is not one that you would cross at speed. Thankfully, we were only travelling slowly, but it was still very rough. From the Georgetown Forsyth Road, it was 45 kilometres to Cobbold Gorge, passing through Long Gully owned by the Young family, Howlong operated by Simon Terry, Townley Station owned by Chris and Eliza Fox, and the turn-off to Robin Hood Station. We were heading deep into the heart of the Gulf Savannah region to find the hidden outback oasis tucked away within the rugged sandstone formations. Cobbold Gorge is located on a working cattle property surrounded by native bushland. A breathtaking natural wonder, we had read, so were looking forward to it. I was surprised by the amount of bitumen before the well-maintained gravel road, though thanks to travellers who drive at speed with corrugations. Some of the corners were quite sharp and corrugated, as well as a number of blind crests and narrow grids. The road had quite a few twists and turns, short sharp rises, and multiple washed-out watercourses, not to forget the beast standing in the middle of the road drinking from a puddle. As we were driving through cattle stations, there were a number of mobs of cattle either grazing or camped alongside the road. Robin Hood Station, owned by the Terry family, was supposedly named because it adjoined the Sherwood mining lease, originally owned by the Clark family, who owned a hotel and billiard room at Perryville, about 25 kilometres from the present homestead, until 1901, when it is believed they took up Robin Hood. They spent a great deal of time mustering cattle. As no sooner was one muster over, the next one was ready to begin. With the lack of fencing at the time meant the stockmen would spend lots of time searching for cattle in inhospitable and impassable country. Pack horses were used to travel back to the homestead to pick up fresh supplies before setting up camp in another location. In 1929, James Clark died, leaving Robin Hood Station to his eldest son Edward, who by then had already taken on the responsibility of running the property. When Eddie Clark retired, his son Teddy took over the property, and it is at that time the Clark family met the Terry family. Cobb Terry, Simon's father, was on a cattle buying trip in Georgetown when he met Teddy Clark, who was interested in selling up. Cobb asked for the first offer, and subsequently the Terry family purchased Robin Hood Station in 1964. Cobb and Mary Terry moved permanently to Robin Hood Station in 1971, together with their 7 children. Simon, the youngest of the Terry children, was just a small child when he arrived at Robin Hood. The mouth of Cobbold Creek, with its permanent clear water, was always a popular watering hole for cattle, but its isolated location on the southwestern extremities of the station meant it was mostly left undisturbed. Those who did visit Cobbold Creek didn't seem to venture beyond its junction with the Robinson River, as the sheer sandstone walls and deep water formed a natural barrier. Then in the early 1990s, Simon and 2 friends made the effort to take a small boat to the mouth of the Cobbold Creek, only to be amazed by the magnificent Cobbold Gorge. Recognising the potential of such a unique geological treasure, together with his wife, they decided to develop a tourist venture. Around 1994, they commenced running tours out of Georgetown and then developed a camping area. Accommodation units were acquired from the Sydney 2000 Olympic site and from the closure of the Kidston gold mine in 2002-2003, and since then has continued to evolve. We arrived at Cobbold Gorge around midday and took time setting up Gidget. As Cobbold Gorge is only accessible on an informative guided 3-hour tour that includes a boat ride, a walk over the glass bridge, and time to explore the sandstone escarpments, that was for tomorrow. For the rest of the afternoon, we enjoyed the lodge area, taking time to watch the ducks on the lagoon and enjoying the scenery around camp. The following morning we boarded a bus that would take us to the gorge, across the Robinson River, and to a shelter at the beginning of our cruise up the gorge. What a ride across the river, bringing back memories of crossing the Ironsley River years ago while working on a cattle station in the area. I gingerly climbed aboard the custom-made boat with its virtually silent electric motor and wondered what I had let myself in for. Water is not something I enjoy being on or in. No sooner had we left the jetty, we saw a freshwater crocodile lying on the sandbank at the mouth of the gorge. What a great way to start our cruise along the 600-metre waterway, between towering gorge walls filled with eerie silence. The beginning of the gorge wasn't all that wide, but little was I to know. The further up the gorge we went, the narrower it got, with the rugged sandstone formations towering above us. They were spectacular, at least 19 metres high above the waterline, but said to be up to 30 metres high from the valley floor. Cobbold Gorge is considered Queensland's youngest gorge, at roughly 10,000 to 135 million years old, depending on the geological focus, its formation or rock age. The geological processes that form the rugged ochre-red banded and ribbed walls of the gorge are remarkable, with the geological history of this ancient landscape around Cobbold Creek Gorge and the Forysth area of which it is part spanned almost 1,700 million years, when sand and mud sediments were deposited on what was then the ocean floor. until eventually layers built up to be more than 10 kilometres thick. The Robinson River Fault is a significant geological structure that directly influenced the formation and location of the 10,000-year-old Cobbold Gorge. It serves as a major straight-line boundary separating two distinct ancient rock units, the Etheridge Group and the Hampstead Sandstone. To the east of the Robinson River and the fault line, the landscape consists of older Precambrian metamorphic rocks of the Etheridge Group. The fault line controls the path of the current Robinson River and created the conditions for Cobbold Creek to carve a deep, narrow and incredibly young gorge through the brittle sandstone. Movement in the Earth's crust caused the sediments to compress, forming the younger Jurassic Hampstead Sandstone on the western side of the fault, while the same sandstone was completely eroded away on the higher eastern side. Then further movement caused the sedimentary rock to fracture. While the fault has a long history, geologists believe that minor recent movements, potentially in the last 10,000 years, along this fault may have triggered the diversion of Cobbold Creek, forcing it into its current narrow 30-metre high gorge. Torrential wet seasons over many years spilled torrents of water through the narrow fractures, creating deep gorges and permanent springs and seepages, creating this narrow, dramatic landscape. Minor movements in recent times, estimated to be around 10,000 years ago rather than millions, have contributed to the formation of the lower reaches of Cobbold Gorge that we were seeing. The gorge itself is unique, and as we moved further into the gorge, it narrowed to just 2 metres in places, just wide enough for the boat to motor through with care. The gorge occupies an area of about 80 square kilometres. The narrowness indicates that Cobbold Gorge is the youngest known gorge in Queensland today, and evidence of the geological processes were clearly visible. All the water from Cobbold Creek and its tributaries is funneled through the very narrow slit in the sandstone that is Cobbold Creek Gorge. The exact reason is uncertain. Water from rainfall percolates down the joints into the sandstone until it meets an impervious layer like a shale bed. If the impervious layer is exposed in the side of the creek or gully, the water will seep out as a spring. These small springs were amazing to see in places along the walls of Cobbold Creek Gorge. To see trickling water down the spectacular creeks like little waterfalls without the big show as it drops over an escarpment. The silence within the gorge was eerie. We didn't hear any bird life, but did see lots of small archerfish in the water. We sailed under Australia's first fully glass 19-metre high and 11-metre long bridge. I must admit I became a little nervous, as part of our walk across the top of escarpment would take us across this bridge. Heights I am not a fan of. In some places the walls were so close that we could reach out and touch them, even having to watch our heads as we motored around one narrow section. The walls, shaped over the ages by the ebb and flow of water, creating visually impressive waves in the rocks, was incredible. So smooth looking in places. As we looked up to the top of the escarpment, we could see in places thin layers of pebbles present in the sandstone. These were originally gravel layers in the sand, deposited during times of flood when the stronger current allowed larger materials to be transported. The cruise ended at a very narrow section where our guide then swapped ends of the boat and we motored back to the jetty. The return journey was just as amazing, and to sit in silence and gaze around at such incredible geological formations, the tranquility was incredible. Once back on firmer land, we then took a walk and talk along and over the sandstone escarpments that surround Cobbold Gorge. The trail took us from the bottom of the gorge up to the escarpment above. Our very informative guide pointed out plants of interest, explaining their bush tucker and or medicinal values and properties, and covered some of the European history of the area. From up here we could see some of the country that surrounded the gorge and enjoyed the view from the top. It was incredible. The rock formations were so vastly different from those in the gorge. The trail led us to Australia's first fully glassed 19-metre high bridge that sits 17 metres above the gorge. We even had to put on little booties or sockets over our shoes to protect the glass so that we didn't scratch or scuff it in any way. After looking down into the gorge, I made a hasty dash across the bridge. We continued exploring the incredible geological landforms and the amazing savanna wonderland at the top of the escarpment before making our way back through a crack in the sandstone, where we caught the bus back to camp. The walk was impressive, as was the sheer magnitude of the gorge. It was breathtaking. Like many other outback camps, the sunsets here aren't to be missed. There's something whimsical about watching the sunset drop down over the landscape, changing every minute until the oranges, yellow and pink hues disappear to make way for the evening. What a way to end an enjoyable day. Our visit to Cobbold Gorge was an awesome and unforgettable experience. Thanks go to the Terry family, who seem to be intrinsically linked, not just by their family history of the area, but also to the land itself and the country they manage with minimal environmental impact. In 2009, the Terry family established the Cobbold Gorge Nature Reserve, a 4,720 hectare nature refuge, a voluntary agreement between themselves and the Queensland Government that acknowledges a commitment to manage and preserve the land with significant conservation and cultural values, while allowing compatible and sustainable land uses to continue. The refuge protects rare and vulnerable plant species and also forms wildlife corridors and catchment linkages and protects several regional ecosystems. I hope you have enjoyed our stay at Cobbold Gorge. Join us next episode as we make our way to Mount Surprise and on to Undara lava tubes. Give us a thumbs up if you have enjoyed this segment. Cheers for now. Live life to the full. Rick and Rosemary. R&R Living Life.